nevertheless, there are some people who are starting to question whether democracy is the ideal political system.
Oh yeah? Like who? Name one.
Okay, I'll name one.
All right.
Pat Buchanan.
Okay.
He wrote an article titled, "Is Democracy in a Death Spiral?" And in it he says, quote, "If democracy doesn't deliver, dispense with it." End quote. Is it that simple, Charles?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, you've got several different things going on at once. Firstly, if democracy doesn't deliver, will deliver what? Now, presumably he means good governance.
Yeah, deliver the goods.
Well, yeah, but what are those goods? You see, what is good governance?
Uh-huh.
Well, the problem is we have been able to get away as a nation without defined first principles for a long time. We're all about freedom. Okay, freedom to do what? What does that actually mean? Freedom to do what? What does that actually mean? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
It's never defined. One could make the argument that in terms of self-gratification, in terms of abortion, contraception, and all that, democracy has delivered the goods. So you see, a lot depends on what you define as good governance.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, what we're living in is a moral swamp, destined for ruin for both moral, financial, political, and other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
For others, it's paradise on earth. It's what the Founding Fathers really intended. That's how it is that gay marriage is in the Constitution, and abortion as well. I'll bet you didn't realize the Founding Fathers put them in there. Neither did they, but nevertheless, they were. So, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, let's presume for a minute that we do have first principles, that we do have an idea of good governance, and that democracy has not delivered it. Let's admit that for the moment. Although, as I say, getting past that first hurdle is a pretty big one. Then there remain two problems. One is that we're all conditioned to equate democracy with goodness.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, you might as well say, well, if goodness doesn't deliver, let's get rid of goodness. Well, no one is going to do that unless they learn to overcome that conditioning. That's very hard to do.
Right. One of the things Pat Buchanan did mention, because you said we equate democracy with goodness, as if that's the end. That's actually one of the things he said. He said there's a growing feeling that democracy is not an end in and of itself, that it's a means to an end. Therefore, if it's not giving us the right end, then dispense with it.
And that's where you get the problem, is defining the end.
Yeah.
And again, it's true. If people begin to realize that democracy, so-called, because that we haven't defined.
Yeah.
I'll touch on that in a minute. But if that's the case, if democracy is not an end in itself, then we have to define what it is we want.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. But secondarily, we're conditioned to think democracy is good, but nobody can really agree on what it is. I mean, we have supposedly representative democracy. The Soviets had people's democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Idi Amin called cannibalism nutritional democracy.
Ah.
Now, I remember asking an old Central European gentleman if he was a Republican or a Democrat. I said, I can't very well be a Republican because I'm a monarchist. And I can't very well be a Democrat because I do not believe in democracy. And I said, well, are you against democracy? And he said, certainly not. But I'm not against the tooth fairy either. So, the only real democracy that I think I've ever seen or can really exist is the open town meeting in some of the New England towns.
Mm-hmm.
And even that was started under the monarchy.
Yeah.
Where the warrant today summoning the voters says, you're hereby summoned in the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to consider la la la. When they first wrote those warrants was in the name of His Majesty the King.
Yeah. As
if His Majesty the King would care what the town of Stockton, Massachusetts was voting on.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the thing remains that you've got that definition problem again. Even if you got through all that, now we've determined that it's only a means to an end, it's not an end in itself, and it doesn't deliver the goods. We got that done. we've got down that democracy is not simply another word for goodness.
Yeah.
And we've gotten down some sort of a working definition of democracy. We have one last and major problem, and that is that the dominant classes in this country are able to rule as they do because of the accepted view of democracy. Dislodging it means dislodging them.
Okay.
And, you know, A, how do you do it? B, what do you replace them with?
Okay.
So I don't think it sounds simple, and I agree that it's a step in the right direction. I don't want to, and especially, you know, coming from Pat Buchanan, I don't want to minimize its importance at all. But I'm just saying it's simple in one way, but very complex. The minute you buy into that, then you've just opened up a whole bunch of other questions.
I see. Okay, so so does it surprise you that Pat Buchanan, who's been so involved in American politics, would say something so nonchalant about dispensing with democracy?
No, it doesn't. And the reason is that Pat, you know, has had a lot of real practical hands-on experience with our system. You know, going back all the way to when he was working in the Nixon White House as a speechwriter. And he's a very keen observer, you know. He has his own particular hang-ups. I mean, he was certainly raised a good Americanist Catholic. But that in recent years, because he's a keen thinker, has begun to drop. You know, I read an article of his a few years ago in which he said that perhaps a big chunk of our problem was that heresy was with us from the beginning, from the founding of the country.
What was that heresy?
Puritanism.
Oh.
But for him to say that, in the light of everything he'd always been, of everything he'd always written, really hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And so I think, like all of us, you know, if I keep on coming up and hitting you, eventually you're going to understand, A, that my fist hurts, and B, that I'm probably not a nice person. Now, it may take you a while. But if you're not brain dead, you may catch on. And he's far from brain dead by any stretch.
Of course.
So the thing is, though, he's had to watch everything we've seen over the past several decades working against the conditioning he was implanted with. But, you know, you go through these stages. The first is, my gosh, this isn't what I was taught to believe about this place. And then you begin to think, well, maybe actually it is. It's just that what I was taught to believe was not entirely correct. And that what I thought of as the way things should be and ought to be was actually simply a stage into what they're becoming. You know, I thought I was going to be a pupa my whole life. It turns out, no, I'm going to have to break out of here and be turned into a big moth. You thought I was going to say butterfly, didn't you?
A monarch butterfly.
No, sadly enough, more like a Luna moth.
Okay. Okay, well, let's say, you know, okay, well, some people might say, so democracy's got some flaws. So what? It's the product of enlightenment, philosophy, science. It's the best possible system we've got. What would you say to that person?
I'd ask him how long he's been living at the Braille Institute. I mean...
Because it's democracy or totalitarianism, isn't it?
Yeah, so basically I could be punched or I could be kicked. Thank you very much. You know, I could eat slop or I could drink swill. Why, given the rich variety of things human history has produced, why is it that all that is open to me are the two worst elements of the past century and a half? How is it that's all I get to choose from?
Well, I don't know.
No, well, that's because my question is at the Braille Institute right now. I hope you're having a good time.